Hi, second grade students. Today's story is from Knowledge 6, Lesson 2, called The Reasons for Seasons. Before I begin our read aloud, I'm going to introduce our vocabulary words. Our first vocabulary word for today's story is the word hemisphere. Repeat after me. Hemisphere. Hemisphere means half of Earth as divided north and south by the equator, or east and west by the prime meridian. Our next vocabulary word is the word revolves. Say revolves. Revolves means to move in a circular path around an object. Our last vocabulary word is the word tilt. Say tilt. Tilt means to slant or to place at an angle. Right now, Earth is moving. Even though you cannot feel it, Earth is always moving in space in two ways. The first way the Earth moves is called rotation. Rotation is the movement of Earth around its axis. This controls the cycle of daytime and nighttime. The Earth takes 24 hours to turn or rotate once on its axis. The Earth rotates in a counterclockwise direction from daytime to nighttime and back to daytime again. During rotation, the part of Earth that is facing the sun changes. When it is daytime where you are, that means the part of the Earth on which you are standing is facing the sun. Sunlight hits our planet and moves across it from east to west. This is why we see the sun rising in the east and setting in the west. Sunset eventually occurs when certain parts of Earth turn or rotate away from the sun and nighttime begins. The cycle continues over and over again. The second way the Earth moves is called revolution. Earth revolves or orbits around the sun in an almost circular path. Therefore, as you live on Earth, you are traveling around the sun too. It takes Earth 365.25 days, or 1 year, to complete one revolution or orbit. You might be wondering about that quarter of a day. This quarter explains why we have a leap year every 4 years. During a leap year, we add on one additional day to the calendar to catch it up to Earth's orbit around the sun. Earth is tilted as it orbits the sun. Tilt or slant your head to one side. The Earth remains at this same angle and points in the same direction throughout its entire orbit. Now let's find out more about how the Earth's tilt causes the seasonal cycle. Earth is divided into hemispheres or halves. Just like an orange can be cut in half either through the center, from side to side, or from top to bottom. Earth can also be divided in two different ways. Our planet is divided into half in the northern and southern hemispheres by an imaginary line on its surface called the equator. The equator is the same distance from the North Pole as it is the South Pole. The United States, where we live, is located in the northern hemisphere. Earth can also be divided into two halves called the eastern and western hemispheres. These hemispheres are divided by the prime meridian, an imaginary line used to split Earth into eastern and western halves. When the northern hemisphere is tilted toward the sun during Earth's revolution around the sun, it receives more intense light from the sun at a more direct angle. During this time, it is summer in the northern hemisphere. Around June 21st each year, the sun reaches its highest point overhead in the northern hemisphere. This is called the summer solstice, and is referred to as the longest day of the year. That means that there is daylight for a longer period of time on that day, more than any other day of the year. People in the southern hemisphere are experiencing winter, while people in the northern hemisphere are experiencing summer. On June 21st in the southern hemisphere, that part of the Earth is tilted away from the sun, with the sun at such a low angle in the sky. The sunlight is not as strong or as intense, and there is less of it, so that part of the Earth receives less light and less energy than the northern hemisphere. June 21st is the winter solstice, or the shortest day of the year in the southern hemisphere. It is the opposite of the northern hemisphere. As Earth revolves around the sun, the seasons begin to change depending on which hemisphere is tilted most directly toward the sun. This depends on where Earth is on its revolution or orbit around the sun. One revolution takes 1 year, and each hemisphere is tilted directly in the sun for part of that year. 6 months after the longest day in the northern hemisphere, the shortest day then occurs. The winter solstice in the northern hemisphere is on December 21st. This, of course, is the longest day of the year, or summer solstice, in the southern hemisphere. They are opposites. When Earth is halfway between the two solstices, both hemispheres receive the same amount of sunlight. This means that the hours of daylight and of darkness are the same in each hemisphere. The days that are equal are called equinoxes. The spring equinox occurs at the beginning of spring on March 21st. The autumn equinox occurs at the beginning of autumn on September 21st. The cycle of one complete orbit or revolution of Earth around the sun marks or measures 1 year. Living things respond to the changes in sunlight and warmth throughout the 4 seasons of the year. With increased sunlight and warmth during the spring and summer, many living things tend to grow well. Animals are born and plants begin to grow. With decreased sunlight during autumn and winter, some plants are ready to be harvested, where others die. Some become dormant or stop growing and making new leaves for the winter, and others wait for their sunlight to return. You will see that most trees do this in the fall and winter. Some animals, to avoid the winter chill, hibernate or migrate. When animals migrate, they move to warmer environments. Not every part of Earth experiences 4 different seasons. Different areas of Earth have different types of weather. This is partly because of the shape and tilt of our planet. This means that different parts of Earth receive different amounts of sunlight and warmth. The area around the equator receives the greatest amount of direct, intense sunlight, so some of the warmest parts of Earth are located in that part of the planet. The North and South poles are opposite ends of our planet, and they receive the least amount of direct sunlight. In fact, although they are so far apart, they have the same kind of weather as each other. It is always cold in the North and South poles, and both places are usually covered in ice. In the next lesson, you will learn more about the cycle involving the 4 seasons and how each season brings with it an ever-changing landscape. Which season is your favorite?